Welcome back to the 22nd Annual CERIAS Security Symposium. The next on our agenda is our annual Fireside Chat. This is usually rated as one of our highest components of the symposium every year, and I suspect this year will be no different. It is a free-form conversation that will be moderated by Professor Eugene Spafford, the founder of CERIAS and Executive Director Emeritus. Professor Spafford, I turn it over to you to introduce our Fireside Chatters.
Well, thank you. Hopefully we'll have quite a bit of chatter here. Let me invite the audience to pose any questions you might like us to consider to the Q&A in Zoom, and I'll go through those and pick out some that seem to fit the flow of the conversation. And having that conversation, we have three very distinguished individuals with a lot of experience in the field. You can read their bios online, but briefly, we have Simon Hunt, who is a vice president at MasterCard for cyber innovation. Amit Yoran, who is the chairman and CEO of Tenable Corporation. And Chet Wisniewski, who is a principal scientist with Sophos. These three gentlemen have considerable background in a number of areas of security, and it should provide an interesting conversation. One of the things I'd like to get started with is looking at some things that have been in the news recently. And ransomware obviously has been in the news. I'm going to bypass that because I know that's going to be the main topic of a panel that two of you are on later today. But another news item is that there seems to be growing momentum in Washington for mandatory reporting of cybersecurity incidents. And this is something that not everyone in industry is completely happy with because of the burden involved and possibly interference with some of their internal investigations. But I would be interested in hearing the three of you make some comment on that. And let me start with Amit, because you have background in both government and industry. What do you have to say about this? I can't hear you.
Please unmute yourself. Every Zoom has to at least have have a please unmute yourself. So now that we've got that out of the way, it's great to be here with you today, and great to join this this terrific panel. I'm a huge fan of mandatory reporting. I think it's, lack of transparency, lack of data, lack of understanding have been a key failure in the cybersecurity market over the last 30 plus years. In order for free markets to work, and I think generally speaking, we all believe that that's a more efficient model, or a most efficient model. You have to have certain characteristics. You have to understand risks. You have to understand the threat environment. You have to understand losses accurately. You have to, and so having greater transparency, part of which is mandatory breach reporting, and not just about silly PII. I mean, PII is important, but that's a small subset of the breaches that we see. Mandatory reporting of breaches increases the level of transparency. It will help the market understand when breaches occur, the volume of breaches which are occurring, the consequences of breaches occurring, and also start understanding which organizations are investing and taking cybersecurity seriously, which organizations are not doing that, and you'll see trends starting to emerge. What types of solutions are more effective or result in fewer breaches? So I'm a huge fan of transparency. I think this is a tremendous and fundamental step forward. The only thing I would say is that it's one of many transparency steps which Washington should undertake. Another one should be a very strong attestation from corporate leadership saying, not saying we do this and we do that, but saying we've looked at our level of cyber risk and we are investing appropriately or taking appropriate actions to mitigate that risk. And so again, I think even these types of attestations, another form of transparency, will help create a better equilibrium for what to date has been just a failed market.
Okay, Chet or Simon?
Sure. I've got a few thoughts. I mean, to me, being able to assess the scale of the task that we face is literally impossible right now. I mean, even the numbers from last week stating, and I'm going to cross the ransomware road, but I saw the Justice Department published a thing about $5.4 billion in cryptocurrency moving around. And of course, all of these numbers are inaccurate, right? That's a glimpse of what the Department of Justice is able to see. It's also money counted multiple times because it was anonymized in the process. There's imperfection all over the place with trying to assess the scale of the problem that we face. And we can see it having ripples throughout the economy and society because we have no, I don't know if we're underestimating, overestimating. We don't know what's in front of us because no one's reporting on these crimes. So I think it's incredibly important. I support everything Amit said. But you look at cyber insurance and what a mess that industry got into with how much payments they had to make because they had no idea the scale of what they were facing. They jumped in anyway, which I'm not sure was the brightest thing. But the point is, like, it was much bigger and much more prominent, and of course, only increased after ransomware type crimes started happening. I've had so many conversations here in Canada with the cyber police at the RCMP in Ottawa. And they're like, well, it's really hard for us to go to Parliament and say we need another $4 billion to get more cyber cops when we can't even explain the scale of the problem because nobody's reporting the crime, right? We can tell you how many houses were broken into in a given postal code. We can tell you how many people were mugged in Toronto last year. And that lets me put boots on the street. But I can't tell you how many people had data stolen from their computer or this type of crime because no one's reporting it. Everybody feels that we're ineffective or incapable of dealing with these crimes, and as a result, many of these crimes go unreported in the personal space against individuals, or in the corporate space. Of course, a lot of it ends up getting swept under the carpet to hopefully preserve some sort of reputation and things like that. So. That's my perspective, that we absolutely need it just to be able to assess what we're doing and be able to judge if we're having any impact.
I would add, my concerns are always timeliness. Like if it's mandatory reporting that you have to report within a certain amount of time, there are often situations where you're not ready, it's premature. You have to be careful about reporting, the accuracy of your report or qualifying it to say, this is our preliminary thoughts. The other thing that I'm always nervous about with reporting is teaching the criminals. There are several examples lately in the news where we or the industry, I should say, has done a great dissertation on the mistakes criminals made in their malware and their technology or their attack. And it just breaks my heart. I mean, every time we discover really bad malware, we should be pimping it and hyping it, saying this is the most advanced thing ever. Like, I don't understand it. We shouldn't be teaching the criminals how to do their job better. So those are the pitfalls that reporting comes into. Otherwise, I agree completely with Chester and Amit that the more information we have on the scope of the problem, the more accurately we can apply efforts to solving it.
I am back, gentlemen. For some reason, the hardwired connection in the CS department went away for a few moments.
Professor Spafford, there was actually a momentary outage of internet on the entire Purdue campus. So it was only about 2 minutes long, but we did just lose 2 minutes of great conversation.
Chester, is that your team?
Oh, okay. It must be some hacking group that didn't want to have answers to the questions. Well, good. I'm sorry I missed some of the wise thoughts there, but I think we'll be able to move on through. Another thing that's been in the news, although not certainly as prominently, is a resurgent interest in the idea of hacking back. And that certainly has both positive and negatives associated with it. The idea that we might have victims who attempt to disrupt or attack back to the organizations or individuals that are causing them problems. Without me going further on that, I know, Simon, you and I talked about this a couple of years ago.
Yep.
I'm sure you've got some interesting thoughts on this.
I am fully supportive of hacking back as long as it's conducted by military and law enforcement. like civilians, we don't have the right to do that. And as much as we want to, it's not our place in the world. If it's done by law enforcement, legally or military, yeah. The challenge is always attestation. Like there are so many cyber attacks that we have thought we knew who was responsible, and then a year or 2 years later, we've changed our minds. If you're hacking back and you've got it wrong, you're as much a criminal as they are. So get it right and do it legally under the guise of law enforcement or military. And I personally don't have a problem with it.
Okay, Amit.
Yeah, I think, for starters, it's illegal, which is always a good guide as to what to do and not to do. But listen, I agree. It's not something that private industry should be getting involved in or even advocate. You have the problems of attribution that Simon highlighted. There's the technical challenges also of how you're going to hack back without having overflow consequences into non-participants or innocent bystanders, and so there's all sorts of challenges, and not the least of which is the technical acumen of many organizations which might consider hacking back, and these are the same folks that have failed to apply a patch for more than 365 days and failed to take sysadmin privileges away from local users, and so I'm not a huge fan that they'll be accurately attributing and pinpointing the source and delivering the munitions correctly.
Chet, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, to adding to mostly what they say, although a little bit of thoughts on having more clear definitions on exactly where lines are, because things are evolving quickly. We have a rapid response team, and one of the things that often happens when we're not doing forensics per se, we're coming in just to kick the bad guys out of the network and assess what happened enough for the victim to begin to recover. So we're not doing full forensics like a Mandiant or something might do. We're really truly rapid response. Get in there, kick the bad guys out, and help the customer assess where they're at so they can make a plan to start recovering from their attack. And in that scenario, in 3/4 or more of the cases these days, data's been stolen. In a lot of cases, that data is now sitting on a criminal-owned Dropbox or mega.co.nz or some file sharing service, and the password's been left behind. And so there's vagaries of things like that. Is that hacking back? If I log into the criminal's mega account to delete the data they stole from me, that's my data, is that hacking back? Is that in violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act? I'm accessing somebody else's account clearly without their intentional permission. So I think there are fuzzy areas like that where it can be valuable. I believe victims in that scenario should absolutely be able to at least ascertain what data is on that drive of theirs so that they can understand the scope of their incident, if not, in fact, delete that data from the criminals. But that's very different than necessarily truly attacking back, doing an actual offensive operation against the adversary. Because again, in so many of the cases that we're involved in, the FBI may already be investigating the group that we're trying to help the victim recover from. And we don't know that we might, if we were to do anything proactive at all, we could be disrupting an active investigation and making it even worse, not even, let alone helping. So the only disagreement I have there is just those kind of fuzzy edges now where sometimes you're able to maybe get access to your own things, even on the dark web. And, do we have to bring in the FBI every single time? And the time lost in engaging the law enforcement could be the time difference between the criminal actually disseminating your information and being able to keep it private.
Well, as somebody with fuzzy edges, I sort of resonate with that. Other comments from the panelists to that?
I would say to Chester, I think Chester makes a really good point. I guess I am perhaps privileged because I have a good relationship with the FBI and the Secret Service because of the size of MasterCard. And I know if I called them and said, hey, can I delete this? I'd get a very quick response. I do appreciate that not every company has such a relationship, but I have never found in the US law enforcement be anything less than helpful and positive in situations like this. There's no downside in engaging them at all.
To be clear, Simon, That's absolutely been the case for us as well.
Yeah.
Like, because we're dealing with quantities of these, we have relationships now with many FBI field offices, and they've always given us the go-ahead when it's a reasonable request. But I think individual organizations that may not have those relationships or may not have a third party like us involved where we've already established those relationships, it becomes this fuzzy thing for them. And I think we should, or we should make it clear what you're saying. We should just make it, try to get the word out to everybody. You know what? Join InfraGard, build that relationship so it's there, and the day you need it, you just pick up the phone and go.
You call your local guy, and he said, "Sure."
Listen, I'm a huge believer. Join InfraGard, engage with FBI, know who your local guy is. I would also add that a vast majority of general counsels that I have worked with in the past would not favor that response or say, yeah, this is the first call, the first call we should make. They'd be very reluctant to get the FBI or law enforcement involved. And sometimes there are differences of objectives between law enforcement, which is primarily interested in prosecution of crimes, and those trying to defend networks and keep their operations safe and resilient and repair, right? I mean, law enforcement may want to fishbowl something and observe and monitoring and track back and trace, and that isn't necessarily in the best interest at all times of the operators. There's another great question in the Q&A panel. It says, do we have the right to set decoys and quote unquote poison data that impacts the adversary's environments? Which is something that and maybe I'm drawing a fine line, I like to draw a distinction and say, in my opinion, that doesn't feel like hacking back. The couple of lawyers that have spoken to on this topic vehemently disagree and say that you cannot create, for instance, a PDF or a document with some malware in it and put it off in a honey network or honey system and say, hey, anybody that grabs that and brings it to their environment, deserves what they get. That is, in fact, at least according to the two lawyers that I've spoken to, that is in fact illegal to do. So that there may be other commentary on that.
No,
I've heard that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the same laws as applies to putting a poisoned lunch in the staff fridge. Yeah, you cannot knowingly poison somebody, but you could put a distasteful lunch in there. That's fine.
Well, I guess there's a difference between a beacon and malware too, right? You can look at things like Thinks Canary, which is simply a beacon, which arguably every website's doing to us with cookies so they can sell us the right brand of underwear or whatever they're trying to put on Amazon tomorrow. So there's there's kind of a fine line between something that's malicious and something that simply lets you know that I've been triggered and potentially I'm now sitting at this IP address if you're more interested in knowing who might have opened it.
Let me circle around back to something that Amit had said about corporate lawyers not being very supportive of doing these kind of things. Would this be something that if they knew that there was a 24-hour mandatory reporting deadline, that they'd be less reluctant to allow people to make that call? That's kind of directed at any of you, but.
Yeah, listen, I do think that having, whether it's 24 hours, regardless what the time period is, if there's a regulatory requirement to provide notification to or through law enforcement or to some other mechanism, then, most general counsels, that I've worked with would say, hey, we need to comply with the regulations, the laws, and so that would perhaps open paths of communication that don't exist today.
Well, now let me expand this a little bit because all three of you work with organizations with international reach, and we've been talking sort of about the U.S. situation, but that's obviously not the case internationally. That other countries have different laws and regulations. What do you see there in terms of international norms or the direction? Where these kinds of issues of reporting and right of self-action, how do those sort of play out internationally? And Simon, I'll ask you first to respond to this.
Yeah, it's very, very complex. We assess 140 different countries' regulations when we do anything in cyber, and we spend a lot with external counsel and legal. It is very variable and ever changing. There's no no stability at all. So to put the corporate lawyer's hat on, everything becomes a risk decision. We look at where our major business flows are, and we try and guess where the biggest legal liabilities are. And every now and again, we get caught out. Like Nigeria and Morocco have ferociously tough cybersecurity laws that are interpreted very, very harshly, and sometimes result in criminal proceedings. So some things like hacking back, like doing a port scan in Morocco, could get you sent to jail individually. So it becomes a risk decision if you want to do that. And of course, critical infrastructure in Russia and China, if you accidentally do a pen test against somebody considered a critical infrastructure, it could be a bank or a municipality, huge problems. So yeah, as companies develop international business, keeping abreast of the particular cybersecurity tone within those countries is difficult. And the best advice I give to small companies is look what everybody else is doing. If you are about to break new ground and do a new thing, be very, very cautious. If you're doing what other people seem to be doing, you may be on safe territory. But that doesn't, just copying doesn't protect you from liability.
Right. Well, Tenable makes a premier product that does some of that reach out and testing. So what's been your experience?
In our license agreements and usage agreements, we do have the terms of use which require that you're complying with the local laws, jurisdictions, authorities that you have, and so on and so forth. So it's not perfect by any stretch, but it is something that we have enforced on occasion, and we have been notified by law enforcement in various geographies that not necessarily Nessus, which you wouldn't have visibility into, but that our SaaS platforms have been used to poke and prod into other people's environments. And sometimes it's as simple as a misconfiguration, you fat fingering in an IP range that doesn't belong to you. And sometimes it's a little bit more involved than that. But it is something that we, I'd say put forth a pretty strong effort to enforce where we are made aware of transgressions.
Okay. Chet, anything?
More on the breach notification side of things and things like that. I mean, I got a bit more visibility there from my perspective in that, well, one, similar to the US, I just noticed yesterday that in Canada, in a bill that's actually related to freedom of information changes they're making, they're going to slip in a mandatory breach notification, it looks like, if that bill passes. So very similar legislation, it looks like, to what's being proposed in the United States, which is not uncommon. Canada and the US often have very similar rules there. What's interesting to me more is the GDPR side, when it kicked in, and watching, interacting with a lot of victims in Europe after GDPR passed, and the quantity of them that are willing to risk the regulatory penalties of hiding their breaches and not reporting them, and collaborating with criminals on, well, we'll pay the criminal to keep quiet so we don't have to report this, because if we report it, we think the outcome's going to be worse than getting the criminal to be quiet. And that's a little disturbing. I mean, it's not like half or more than half or anything like that, but it's a lot larger number of them than I would have expected have chosen to not disclose when they're legally obligated to do so. So these laws in their past are no magic panacea thing. I mean, organizations are still going to do what they think is in their best interest, even if it means violating the rules. And if they have to, they'll pay their penalty.
All right. A follow-up question from somebody in the audience. Would a well-implemented DRM solution go a long way to protecting sensitive data exposure within or outside an organization? And are there pitfalls beyond just simply the complexity to implement and have this work? So thoughts by anyone on that?
Yeah, I guess this is why CISOs, I don't say make a lot of money, but have the opportunity to really contribute to their organizations. DRM solutions can certainly be part of the overall approach. There are a lot of implementation challenges. First of all, it's not foolproof. Second of all, there's a lot of nuance and complexity in properly implementing DRM or many other security solutions, including how well do you understand your data? How well do you classify it? How well do you discover where it is and where it isn't? How flexible are the systems that you choose to implement DRM on top of or next to? Because they can also get in the way of productivity and ease of use and the things which make which really drive efficiency in the organization. So I think DRM can be a part of it, but it is historically suffered from a lot of these challenges to implementation.
Absolutely. A well-implemented DRM, that would be a really good thing at reducing the risk. It's a very challenging space though, very challenging. And I think something that small companies can do really well. But as your company grows in size and complexity, DRM gets very difficult sometimes to implement.
Well, here's another question that was inspired by this, and I'll alter this a little bit, but we have many malicious actors who appear to be acting with impunity. They're operating from locations where they have some protection, potentially, from the national government, or in the case, for instance, of North Korea, they actually are the government. And at least the observed kinds of consequences for those actions so far has been either ineffective or nil. This is a difficult area, obviously, for a lot of reasons. What do you think would be appropriate consequences that can be carried out, if not by the commercial entities, by governments, collections of governments, that would have some deterrent effect? Again, I think all three of you can comment to this, but so any of you are welcome to take the lead.
Well, it seems to me like, I mean, this is really a political issue more than anything else, because obviously we've seen very few cases, but beginning the FBI seemingly taking some proactive action against some of these ransomware criminals in the case of the SolarWinds. I forget which one it was now, that they went clearly disrupted the command and control and got some of the Bitcoin back from Colonial Pipeline. And like, we've not really seen publicly any offensive actions on behalf of the US government. Everything they've done previously had been completely secret and never talked about if anything was done at all. And now we're starting to see them not only doing a little bit, but taking being okay with it being public, letting the public know that they are taking some action and they are getting engaged in trying to disrupt some of this criminal activity. But the challenge is, like you say, Spaff, I mean, we've seen actors in Russia that are daytime GRU, evening personal cybercrime. And we see the same thing in Iran, and we see the same thing in China, MSS in the daytime, cybercrime in the evenings or the weekends for fun, and they're government officials, right? In some way or another, they're officers of MSS, they're officers of GRU, they're I mean, what can be done other than the sanctions and the international warrants and indictments that are, we only of course see the unsealed ones. There's tons more that are sealed, which are the really valuable ones, because those are the ones where we actually think we're going to get someone and we don't want them to know they're indicted so we can get them. I think we should give them all free tickets to Disneyland.
Torture them.
That's it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Simon.
Okay, so yeah, Chester brings it up that we know who these people are. We know in many cases where they live. I mean, the intelligence, we know exactly who these people are. We are unable to act through our domestic law enforcement. International law enforcement is somewhat stifled. The opportunity for sanctions and the economic constraints against those countries to force action is there. Even domestically, if you look at the average time to prosecution for a domestic, US domestic cyber criminal, it's years. It's multiple years of them operating before they finally are jailed. So law enforcement is due a shakeup in terms of this very unusual threat, which is geographically unlimited and equally achievable from anywhere in the world. It needs to be faster and more international cooperation, and taken a lot more seriously in terms of economic sanctions and geopolitical power.
Here's what I found.
Generally, I agree. I think the government can. This is an area where the government has been starting to be more active and can certainly be more active. I think the indictments that we've seen in recent years are an incredibly important move. Many people will say, okay, well, if they're never going to step foot in a jail or be held accountable, then this is a waste of time. I disagree. If we indict folks, it sends an important signal in terms of acceptable behavior and establishing international norms of behavior, which over time become customary international law. So it's incredibly important that we are very loud and forceful when these crimes occur, even if it doesn't feel like there's immediate gratification. The government response generally should fall into two categories. There's the retorts, which are the legal activities, the persona non grata, people out of the country, implement sanctions, changes in trade posture and agreements, and then there are the category of not necessarily legal, but still regularly achieved countermeasures. So things like hacking back, and I think, as Simon mentioned, some of those are visible, some of them are not. And I think the government should do a better job educating the public and the world at large about which ones are visible and why. And that can create more and greater deterrence. But there's other actions, whole of government responses, things like freezing assets. I don't think we've seen cyber attacks get to the point of renditions, but we should leave all options on the table, and I think that does add to deterrence. But the conclusion here, like it or not, is ultimately the same, and I think will be the same for years to come, which is the government, for combinations of political will or inability, cannot keep you safe, cannot keep your organization safe. And so while we can cooperate with law enforcement and encourage all these things to happen, we're operating very much in the Wild West, and every organization needs to exercise a high degree of care and protect themselves. And that's just, better or worse, the world that we live in and will continue living in for the foreseeable future.
Let's look at the other side of the coin, though. We talked about like punitive efforts against these mastermind criminals. But what about the tens of thousands of Yahoo boys in Nigeria who individually are causing tremendous disruption to vulnerable people, but they're clawing their way out of abject poverty? What do you do about those guys who are just attacking via social media, phishing, extorting grandparents and elderly and vulnerable people? Having an international law enforcement act against them is tremendously difficult. Maybe the response there is instead to look at how we can offer support and assistance to change those people so they don't gravitate towards cybercrime, the entry-level cybercrime, that they are given more opportunity.
And change the systemic mechanisms that they're taking advantage of, right? I mean, if it's taking advantage of elderly or somebody who just can give their password online or on the phone and fall victim, then I would say systemically that's a pretty horrific design by whoever's implementing and offering that as a service. So maybe ascribing some degree of liability to those parties might be worthwhile. Although this is certainly going to be only agreed to by the cyber professionals.
Well, I mean, there's two. I mean, Nigeria is quite strict with this stuff, and to be fair, I mean, I follow their cybercrime Twitter feed, and they're arresting large groups of people on a pretty regular basis. Actually, they're involved in a lot of these crimes. They're very aggressive in law enforcement there, as you pointed out earlier, with their rules and their laws. And they aren't trying to enforce them. And I just saw yesterday more indictments come through for Nigerian criminals that were targeting U.S. entities that came through yesterday from the Department of Justice. So I would say we're having more success in actual law enforcement of cybercrime in Nigeria than we are in America. I mean, they're quite aggressive about it. I'm not sure, to your point, that we should the systemic causes would be a much better way of addressing it, considering the poverty and the issues that are causing it. It'd be better to like have it stop for good reasons. But from a law enforcement perspective, they're not incapable. And when you said that, it just kind of triggered in my mind. I mean, how is this different than what's happening in Moldova or Russia or Belarus or like you've got highly trained computer science professionals that were well educated in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s who can't find legitimate work, who end up getting caught up in these groups, being coders for them and helping them figure out how to launder the money and stuff. I mean, these are incredibly well educated people that if they were in Warsaw, Facebook would be happy to hire them and put them to work, but somehow they're in a dysfunctional economy that's leading them to conduct these crimes. So can we extend that idea from Nigeria into these former Soviet republics, into CIS countries as well? Because it seems like that's an awful lot of talent working in the wrong direction.
Very good point.
Well, there's really, that's the more general question, I think, in a lot of ways, is how do we train or encourage anyone to use what they're doing more for the good? And it's an economic issue, eventually, is what it comes down to. Because as you know, there are some people who are just trying to make a living for their families. Although I think some of the crime gangs that have pulled in $2.3 billion over the last 5 years, either they've got a very large family or they're a little bit beyond what they need. So let's look at this from a different perspective. Many of the victims, when we look at after action kind of reports, have been negligent at worst or careless in applying basic sound security practice, including, as was mentioned earlier, patches in a timely fashion. But other kinds of things, such as the idea now of zero trust has certainly caught on, although the ideas behind zero trust, we were talking about 25, 30 years ago as basic security practice, that people didn't pick up then either. How much blame should be apportioned to some of these victims for not following basic practice? And what do we do to encourage them to get with the program and do a better job of cleaning up after themselves? Now, Simon, I know there's the PCI standards that we use for merchants, but how do we make that more general?
Yeah, that concept of personal responsibility is a difficult one. Different social groups have different levels of expertise. But Spaff, you and I have talked about this. We're 50 years into this industry now, at least, and we still can't get the basics right. You know, we still can't get people to think about password security and, you know, patching. Patching shouldn't be a complicated topic to people. I mean, everyone with a smart TV is used to patching now. Yeah, everyone with the gaming console is patching. But still, it's a mystery to most people, and also most people think cybersecurity is not their problem. That's somebody else's problem. That's the bank's problem, the telephone company's problem, the game console's problem, the maker of the TV's problem. It's something I would like to see as like a, you know, very early on in schooling, but I would probably want to see fiscal, you know, financial acumen even more important. There's some core skills we're missing in schools right now. Cybersecurity is one of them. The question is it the most important? I would, you know, this forum, of course, we would say it is, but then there's critical thinking, fiscal, you know, financial acumen, other things that society is kind of quite weak on at the moment.
It's very, I mean, it's very different based on who we're addressing, right? There's consumers, and then there's sort of like small and mid-sized businesses, and then there's enterprises, and they're very different answers, I think, to how you get people to come along with doing those things, right? On the consumer side, almost all the things Simon pointed out, those things happen automatically or don't really give you a choice. Like, I know you want to play Xbox right now, but you can't play Xbox because it's playing an update and you don't have a choice. Like, it's just doing it, and you're just going to wait 10 minutes to play Xbox, and or your smart TV or these kinds of things, right? We don't give consumers choices anymore because we know the choice is do it later and they'll never do it. But In the enterprise, I think some of this can be addressed through insurance and audit and things. I mean, the bottom line is we saw the insurance companies take a bath on a lot of these ransomware policies. And part of that is that there was pretty much no requirement at all that you do anything. And instead of doing anything to improve their security, they were just covering their butt with a policy and hoping that if they had an incident, the insurance company would pay out. And that has to stop, right? Like if those companies want to be insured, the carrot and the stick is you either don't get insurance if you don't meet some reasonable qualifications. And those qualifications obviously can vary the price of those policies depending on how mature your security posture is. But of course, to assess that maturity means doing some sort of an audit, or something has to be involved to assess the maturity level, and that doesn't scale, right? I mean, it scales if you're a large organization and you're negotiating $1 million insurance contracts. You darn well want to prove that you meet certain requirements to get a discount and to get better coverage. That doesn't work for 50-person small businesses that obviously it wouldn't be cost effective in order to truly assess their security posture. So I think we have to think about these things in the resources available to address the problem, and the resource for a consumer to address is kind of almost none if you just don't do it for them. And in small business, there's certainly some responsibility, but at the enterprise side, I think we do know what mature programs look like. We know that organizations that threat hunt are going to be far more successful at defending themselves from any adversary than those that are purely reactive. We know that, you know, it's not about the brand of which tools you have per se, but we know the hallmarks of a mature program. And we're not currently doing anything to incent organizations to mature their programs other than they personally discovered that it was a good idea.
I'm probably on the extreme side of holding organizations accountable. I think generally speaking, you know, the basics of how to secure yourself are well understood, and generally speaking, many organizations fail disastrously at doing so. And behave in what I would characterize as a negligent fashion. If we understand the basics of how to protect yourself, we should have an expectation that organizations, the businesses have gone through the effort, they understand that, they have the know-how. If they're a large enough organization, if they're a small enough organization, they either hire the know-how or use providers which can deliver those capabilities to them. In most cases that I'm aware of, it's either a matter of not wanting to incur the cost, which I won't say tough shit, but hey, that's the cost of doing business, or not having the cultural will to say we value security. And I think that point has also been made. And listen, by all means, I'm not saying everybody should be secure at all times. And if you fail to apply a patch, you should be held accountable. But what I am saying is that we can look at an organization's culture and their behavior and say, yeah, generally speaking, they're, you know, high critical, however you want to characterize it, issues they're addressing within a 24-hour period, 36-hour period, 5-day period, whatever the standard is, or they're generally pretty lax about their security practices. They're using passwords instead of MFA. They're you know, local sysadmin privileges. They're not applying fixes on a regular basis, and say, you know what, this is just negligent behavior. And there are very few, almost no instances where we're holding folks accountable for that level of negligence. And I think that is really holding back a culture, a business culture, which could dramatically improve security.
So where do we? Sorry,
so I would add a modification to Amit, because I think businesses have a right to choose their level of risk. You could decide not to implement any cybersecurity. That's a valid business decision. I don't think it's a sensible one, but it's valid. You are allowed to do that. But as Amit says, if you choose not to have mature cybersecurity practices and you get hit by something and lose data, there should be consequences. And you know, the consequence could be your cyber insurance policy, premiums go up, you lose your BBB rating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the bit that's not really clear for every business right now, is how to measure it, how to decide, and the consequences of your choice. Amit, sorry.
Yeah, no, that I agree wholeheartedly, which is, I think, the first question that Spaff asked, which is transparency around mandatory reporting, right? So the consequences are understood, and perhaps even transparency around your risk management practices, and so that investors or customers or people giving you their data or using you as a vendor can say, oh, these guys just have decided not to do cybersecurity, and that's okay because they're the cheapest vendor, and I'm willing to accept, their risk decisions, or it's not okay. But without the transparency, that becomes, without the transparency or the accountability, it just becomes the kind of failed ecosystem that we find ourselves in.
I guess the question I would have is, what do you do about the broad middle where they don't understand that the risk that they're taking on, right? They're not making an educated risk assessment. They think they don't need it. I mean, the number of clients that we see victimized that are like, well, we didn't think it would ever hit us. Like, we only hear it on TV when it's Target and it's Sony and it's this kind of thing, right? It's not hitting small businesses in Idaho. So why do I need to worry about this? And then they're victimized and they're like, well, we didn't know. Like, we literally made a bad decision because we had bad input. And I think that's what, as an industry, we can do, is to try to figure out ways to get that message out to these people that we're not fear mongering to sell you security software, even though I have some to sell you. Like, this is actually happening to people just like you, and you need to understand that. We're not going to tell you what risk decision to make. It's up to you to make that decision, but you make a well-informed decision with your eyes wide open, and I don't think they are, and that's why so many of them are falling victim.
I don't think it's our job to inform them. We could never, that's pushing water uphill, and we'll do our best and we'll beat our war drums as we have for years. I think we have to make it their job to understand the risks associated with the business that they're in and how they conduct business. And that's, again, where I go back to attestation and saying, listen, as a CEO, I've got to attest to the accuracy of our financial reporting. And that means I have to spend time with my CFO. I have to spend time with my auditors. I have to, really dig in and make an attestation that, that my word is behind, or there's consequences. And I think the same has to be true of other forms of business risk, including cyber risk. And so whether it's the CEO, the board of directors, but somebody's got to be able to stand up and say, you know what, we looked at this and we've measured it, we've looked at it, we've dug into it, and we're taking the appropriate action. And just having them attest that they're looking at it, I think is, while it might sound silly, I think is a big step forward.
So some of us feel we do have an obligation to inform. So in my space, because as Spaff said, I hold the entire merchant and banking community of the world to the PCI standards, I cannot allow them to be able to say, I didn't know. Because I can't, that's not an excuse that people should have. So MasterCard, I mean, I supply that data to every merchant that touches a MasterCard, because I want people to know their posture. And it's not perfect, and the industry has a long way to go, but yeah, I feel a deep obligation to inform people. So as Chester says, they can make a better decision, or I can say, you had all the information you needed to make a good decision, you chose to ignore it. You deliberately accepted risk. That's the thing that really worries me, as I think we've all said, accidentally or unknowingly having risk is a huge problem in cybersecurity. Like, I just didn't know I had that server. I didn't know I had that connection. I didn't know I had unpatched Microsoft Exchange servers on the internet. Those questions can be easily answered with technology, whereas so many cybersecurity questions cannot be dealt with technology. So, like, clear out the chaff, educate everyone, make good decisions, and next we need consequences of deliberately choosing to have a high level of risk that affects society. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the comment that several of you made here is we don't do a good job collecting the data. So certainly insurance companies could be part of this, but they also don't have the data. I've talked to several underwriters, and a lot of their premium valuation is simply a guess, because they don't have sufficient information to really titrate the risk appropriately. So this ties into a question, actually two questions that are in the Q&A of sorts, and particularly when we're talking about small and medium-sized organizations. What we hear from them is they don't know what they should be doing or what they should be looking at. And if they're trying to get into this, they may not be able to hire a Purdue grad who can help them. They're looking at all of these competing standards, right? There's the CIS, High Trust, NIST, ITIL. There are all of these different standards that are out there. And many of those have hundreds or more things that they're supposed to look at. And that's just totally overwhelming. Rather than, and then if they look at a top 10 list, that may not be well suited for their industry or for their organization. So how do we address that? How do we combine both the transparency aspect, but the information about what they should be doing to protect themselves? And you know, we've got two companies here that market security software that is designed to help organizations protect their systems. So more generally than just deploying the right tools or even knowing what tools to deploy, how do we go about doing this?
Well, there's some great, in the US, there's some great government initiatives for small business. There's some great, the GCA toolkits. There's really good resources that could try and simplify. To promote myself, MasterCard has the Trust Center, which is designed to educate small business on cybersecurity. It's designed to be a place where they can get tools. It starts with education. There are certain organizations that have the voice of the small businesses and have an opportunity to help them understand the space better and guide them towards, Sophos and Tenable and the vendor space, and say, these are the people who solve these particular aspects of the problem. And this is where you engage them, and this is where you don't. Like if you're two guys in a food cart, Tenable is probably not the right choice for you. If you're 20 people growing rapidly and you have a huge estate of technology, Tenable is exactly the kind of person. I think it starts with people who have the ability and the right to educate small businesses and that connection. And then there's a whole vendorscape to help them solve the problem.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of a flow chart here, right? I mean, the first thing is you got to decide if you're at enough of a scale or in an industry that has the budget allocation to do it yourself, or whether you need to pool in with other organizations because you're too small to be able to handle it on your own, right? And there's so many companies around Vancouver here where I am now, where there's lots of small little tech companies, and they actually do security in-house because they're in tech. They've got smart people that understand the risks, and as a result, they're willing to take it on themselves, even though they may be 25, 30 person companies. But then other organizations those size, just don't have the resources to do it themselves. And I think that's what's interesting about there's all these fractional CISO services, right? Or this type of a concept, right? Somebody who comes in and does that stuff a day a month in your business and spreads the cost across a whole bunch of businesses to provide them with that advice, help you assess risk along the way, help you make good decisions. Maybe your internal IT people can do most of the actual labor of deploying software or monitoring software or watching for alerts, or even obviously managed security service providers as well, provide that plus, including some monitoring and actually taking care of acknowledging those alerts and letting you know about the ones that are critical as opposed to ones that are just noise. And I think there's many different steps along that path, but at the lower end, I don't think it ever even gets to the framework stage, right? When you're talking organizations under 100, under 250 people, unless you're in a regulated industry, you're generally going to be looking to third parties to provide you that advice because you simply don't have the budget to hire that Purdue grad, perhaps. And I think that's before you even get to the determining if you're going to look at NIST or ITIL or things like that, which the bigger organizations obviously do once they start having to be audited or consider going public.
Yeah, I agree. We'll take a Purdue grad. This week we'll take a Purdue football player over anything, given given last week's performance. Listen, there's certainly the expertise factor. There's the cost factor. There's a lot that goes into this calculus about what you're going to do, what you're going to turn to service providers, whether you're going to share cost, and this is something that even government agencies in the U.S. have done and said, hey, listen, for internet access, we used to have thousands of them. We're going to consolidate. We're going to go through major departments, agencies, service people that can act as service, trusted internet connection service providers. And the same is true of over diagnostics and monitoring programs for assessing security. But when I'm going through a hiring decision, when we're going through a hiring decision, the one thing that stands out between those that are successful in the commercial side of cybersecurity and those that aren't is a level of intellectual curiosity in the field. If you're interviewing a candidate, they could have credentials, they could have this, they could have that, and some of those are fantastic, and some of those, law of averages, some of them just turn out to not be what you were expecting. But almost always, if you're hiring someone who loves this stuff, someone who's got a lab at home, someone who's playing with systems, someone who's downloading and testing exploits or trying to detect problems or conducting research on their own, that makes the difference of whether or not someone's going to be successful. So what I would say is, even more than cost, the important thing in cybersecurity is giving a damn. If somebody cares, there are enough free tools out there. There are enough professionals willing to mentor. There are enough, low-cost providers, but it's more typically just it's viewed as a pain or a tax, and somebody doesn't care. Whereas, you've got some organizations where the leadership stands up and says, you know what, this is culturally important to us, and we're going to take this seriously. And even without incurring significant costs, just tightening down how they behave makes a world of difference. So, to me, I don't want to say it's culture first, and then budget and technologies and all that stuff feeds off of it. But it all boils down to the culture.
Companies that try have better outcomes every time.
Exactly.
Well, that's an interesting and a point, and I don't disagree at all, because I see that with our students, is the ones who are just there to put in the time are certainly not as good at this as the ones who are really interested in the material. But we also have an incredible pipeline issue and a talent issue. And it's not unique to just the US. Again, this is a global phenomenon. And finding those individuals who are interested in curious, and trying to convince them that some of this is really interesting and it's a better career potentially than machine learning or blockchain is to actually work in real security. How do we go about doing that? How do we incentivize that? Do you have any insights? I would be interested in that as an educator.
I think and I'll jump in until somebody else is ready. I think, the two pieces I would offer are that, one is avoid it as much as possible, meaning cyber is one of those fields which is painful because it's asymmetric. And the flip side is we can use the asymmetry in our favor too, which means if you're designing the processes correctly, if you're leveraging the expertise correctly, if you're leveraging the right technologies correctly, there are ways to drive terrific asymmetry with the talent that you do have. And I think that has to be top of the agenda. The other is some of the global issues that we were talking about earlier, right? There's tremendous pockets of expertise that exist globally around cybersecurity that we aren't taking advantage of. And so it becomes a much easier path for them to seek out nefarious activities and get a return on time that way than it is for them to earn a living delivering cybersecurity expertise and capability. And I know there's political and geographic challenges there, but there's a lot of talent that exists or could be cultivated that we're failing to do as a society. I think that's an untapped opportunity.
I think go ahead, Simon.
Go ahead, Jess. Oh, thank you. I would say that I've found in the last 10 years, there's equal space in the industry for people who know how to break stuff, like the hackers, the reverse engineers, the people who look deeply in the technology, and the people who understand business and business mitigation. And I'll give you a really simple example. You can solve every Microsoft Windows virus problem by giving somebody an iPad. That's all it takes. You've eliminated the entire attack surface of Windows. And that's a business decision. But that's a decision that somebody with a knowledge of cybersecurity and a knowledge of risk would be able to make without having to be a reverse engineer and understand all the technical problems. So sometimes we get really obsessed with playing with our food in this industry. We talk about deceptionware and honeypots and tracking and watching the criminals and understanding their behaviors, when maybe we should just say, just kick them off the network. I don't do business with Russia, just block everything. Sometimes there are sledgehammer approaches, which are better business decisions. So for anyone thinking about a career in cybersecurity, there are at least two tracks. One is be a deep technical expert, and one is understand somebody's business and apply the tools of cybersecurity to that business problem. Equally valuable, equally valid. If anything, I struggle to find people who understand my business more than I struggle to find people who understand the technology of cybersecurity.
I was going to say something else, but Simon inspired me to say something I was thinking about last night when I was like, what might we talk about tomorrow in the chat? and that was that we're missing this huge social element in all the aspects of cybersecurity, right? Like it amazes me that we think that, well, we'll just turn multi-factor authentication on everywhere and that'll be fine. Not understanding that for some people, they don't understand this stuff. They don't know how it works, or it's not necessary for, it shouldn't be necessarily for the janitor to use multi-factor authentication to open his laptop to order some more bleach for the washrooms. That's maybe an excessive control for that situation, right? We try to apply things ubiquitously as if everything is an equally valued asset, and there's kind of this social element that's missing of making policies realistic and only making them challenging where they need to be and not everywhere. And I think we're getting better at that, I think, with things like zero trust. But I guess Spaff's question was around bringing people in. And I think that's part of the diversity that's missing that can make this a more appealing career for people, is understanding that there's business problems to be solved, there's technical problems to be solved, and we need people that can socially translate these things into practical, applicable policies that will be both enforceable and able to be followed by our staff members to truly, because anything we put in place that's not socially acceptable will be bypassed. And then we've accomplished nothing. We've just had people go around the policy and do something outside of it to accomplish it, right? So, I mean, when I talk to rapid responders more and more often, it's, well, they had a policy in place, but the criminals got in the place where the policy was bypassed. And that is back to, I guess, what Simon's saying. It's not simply being reverse engineers and things. We need to open our space up to people in social sciences and other things to help us do these jobs better and communicate better to the people that we need to participate in these programs.
I'll mention that we've had this interdisciplinary graduate program for 20 years. And really the basic idea behind CERIAS is multidisciplinary rather than just the technical. Some of our most successful grads came in with background in art, philosophy, journalism, and then added these other skills on top, and they don't look at problems the same way. So I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that needs to be cultivated better, I think, across our educational institutions and our hiring processes. That if someone doesn't have a degree in computer science, that doesn't mean they're not qualified, and not everybody recognizes that.
Absolutely. Which
gets to another one of the questions that's here in the Q&A, where someone said that they're finding, this is what we're finding, and I think this is true of many people that I've talked to, is that large companies are really intent on shoving square pegs into round holes. And this can include requiring people to have a CISSP, for instance, or requiring them to have 10 years experience with products that have only been out 5 years before they'll hire them. And the comment here is interesting, that customers will step over $1 to pick up a dime simply because they're unaware of what's important. And this is partly a byproduct of many of the companies, both for the products and actually for some of the add-on security products, marketing what they have rather than actually marketing to the solution space. Is there a better way that, I think we've addressed this in some other ways, but do you have comments on what are ways that we can try to change this to get companies to be more aware of what they should be looking for, that curious individual, that individual that is willing to go the extra mile. Comments?
I would start by, I try and remind all the companies I work with that your level of cybersecurity hygiene or professionalism isn't a competitive advantage, in that you should not be you should not see somebody else's weakness as a benefit to you. Like our adversity is the same. We are all fighting the same criminals. So for every company thinking about how do I develop this cybersecurity practice, how do I do this, you should be able to talk to your peers in the industry. You know, the banking system is perhaps unusual in that all the CISOs in the banking system share freely what's going on, the threats, the problems, the solutions we like, the ones that don't work. But there should be, everybody in a leadership position in cybersecurity should feel that they could reach out and share with peers in the industry and get good advice, because we're all fighting the same enemy here. And I don't think anyone should glory in one of their competitors being hit by a cyber attack. That should be seen as devastating to all of us. If anyone is attacked successfully, we should all feel empathy for those people. So I think that's where it starts, is ask other people what you're doing, how you're solving the problems, learn from each other. And maybe those strange requirements, as you say, for 15 years experience on a package that was developed 10 years ago will slowly evaporate.
Well,
Do
there's
you think
also oh, sorry, Spaff.
I was just going to say, do you think the banking industry is that way because it is so highly regulated, or is there something else about that environment that creates that level of communication and collegiality?
I think highly regulated, but we're all solving almost exactly the same problem. So an attack against one of us is likely to attack all of us. So we all feel equally as vulnerable, perhaps, and we don't glory in each other's failures. There was a time in the cybersecurity industry in particular where we gloried in each other's failures. I think that's dissolving, but I think people still feel that cybersecurity is something that they shouldn't share, they shouldn't talk about, and it needs to be controlled. How you talk about it needs to be controlled, but everyone should feel that their peers are accessible to them. Or rather, I worry when people feel that they can't share their cybersecurity problems with their peers in the industry. It's holding us back.
Chad, I stepped on your comment there, so please.
Oh, no, and just to add to what Simon's saying, I think this education field does a really good job of this as well. We see tons of K-12 schools and universities in the United States that all talk to one another. What are you doing about this problem? How are you solving this problem? How did that work? Well, not as great as we would have liked. I would have tried something else next time, whatever. But getting that conversation flowing. And I'm fortunate here in Vancouver, we have like 3 different local security groups that meet, business people meet, and one's kind of more business oriented and audit oriented for white collar upper management kind of folks. One's the hackers getting together, that's the B-sides and DEF CON crew. And then there's sort of a middle one where it's more generic for just technology professionals to get together and talk about security. But those groups facilitate more positive conversations and improvement in security of everybody in our community than anything else. It always amazes me when I bump into somebody and they say they work in IT security at some company in town, and I've never seen them at any of these meetings, because I'm like, you're an island. Like, how can you survive on your own, right? Like, we're all feeding off of one another and learning from one another, and all of us find it so invaluable that we do everything we can to participate even through a pandemic, because it's so important to our careers and being able to be successful. And too often what I see as a vendor is customers are looking for a product rather than a solution. And that's how they end up with this round hole square peg situation sometimes. They're going, I need to, in the old days it was, I need to buy antivirus, right? So I'm going to put a thing out, RFP out to 10 antivirus vendors, instead of saying, I'm looking to protect my endpoints from getting attacked because all of them are getting compromised, right? You don't necessarily need antivirus. Your goal is to stop this thing that's happening, which is endpoints are being compromised. And there's lots of different ways of approaching that problem. And in fact, you're probably not an expert as the purchaser. The people in the industry are the experts. If you explain your problem to them, you're far more likely to get solutions that fit the shape of the hole better, rather than going out and saying, I need to buy a firewall, or, well, do you need to buy a firewall? What is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Tell us about your problems, come to the experts with your problems, And those experts can then help you find things that will solve the problem rather than necessarily just meet the description in an RFP or an RFI.
And even sort of piggyback on that, it's these problems are 95% consistent. Maybe there's some modest differences between this industry's requirement and that industry's requirement, but the best practices are the best practices, and there's very little confusion. I saw one of the comments in the Q&A panel was kind of highlighting these different industry frameworks, of which there's 80+% overlap between whether it's CIS benchmarks, high trust NIST, so on and so forth. And so, yes, I agree, Spaff, the marketing is confusing, and I would say shame on the industry and the vendor community, trying to peddle their wares. But that's to be expected. The basics are well understood, and do that blocking and tackling before you try and jump onto some bleeding edge marketing. I think you mentioned earlier the zero trust. Well, that's now a hot thing, but that's been around for decades. Decades with different under different monikers. So yeah, these things are evolving, the industry is evolving, and later today I'm going to talk about some things that are really, hey, where is the world really different? But a vast majority of what needs to get done is well understood. Do those things.
Get the basics right.
Get the basics.
Yeah. I'll just say, if anybody wants to go look it up, that if you go back and read the Salzer and Schroeder report from the 1970s, all those principles encompass zero trust and more, and 70s, and we still haven't really gotten to learn those. Well, I'm going to shift this a little bit here because there's a question that was made in the Q&A that opens another topic area. We talk about security, but it's not the only aspect. It's a matter of what it is we're securing. And certainly we're securing some things of economic value, but we also have an awful lot of information that affects individuals, and we're trying to protect privacy. A lot of individuals want security because they want it to protect their privacy, and they lose it in large data breaches or other kinds of situations. So is there a mechanism, GDPR as an example, but should individuals be involved in trying to set some of this policy and apply the pressure? And if so, how do we do that appropriately? Do you have thoughts on that?
I think the GDPR, the frameworks, the penalties are a fine for a negative outcome, but everybody who's lost their data still lost their data. It's interesting. I was at an event this week, and people were asking me a very similar question. And I was saying to them, when some website asks you for your mother's maiden name, just lie. Like, they don't need to know the real name. When it asks for your birthday, lie. Just use the same random date every time so you remember it. You don't have to give these sites facts. And certainly if it's a fact about you that can never be changed, like your mother's maiden name and your birthday, you don't want to give it to anyone who doesn't really need it. The challenge is we kind of lost that battle because everyone's already given that data away to people who didn't need it. So what do? You increase the fines, doesn't stop the problem being lost, and doesn't stop the problem that hackers now are building up this bigger and bigger data set of everybody's true data. So yeah, maybe we need a regulation that lets everyone change their mother's maiden name and their birthday legally. I don't know.
I've seen interesting commentary that this is one reason why perhaps the Chinese are just taking everything that isn't tied down, anything they can find, because they're building huge databases for their AI to work against. And that's the real competitive advantage they're looking for.
You see these questions on social media, like fun questions, like, oh, take the name of your first school and the street you grew up in, that's your new superhero name. Like, you just gave away 2 pieces of information that every bank site asks to log in. Like, now we as professionals see this and think that's stupid, nobody would fall for that. But do we go above and beyond to educate the people who don't realize that, or stop that happening? I don't know. I mean, yes, you're right. People are hoovering this information up, and society is willingly giving it away, and it's very damaging. I don't think punitive fines solve the problem.
No, well, I mean, it's probably not news that Simon's industry wants to hear, but like when people talk about worrying about their credit card being stolen, it's like that's the last fear I have on earth. Like I get a new credit card in 5 minutes, right? I can just call my company, go cancel the thing. I almost never am on the hook for any fraud. The liability protection's covered by butt. And I'm like, credit cards are disposable that way. Like, I don't care if you steal my credit card. I'm much more worried about my social security number, my social insurance number, my date of birth, all these other things that can allow you to buy a boat.
You don't
without
even
my
need to put your
permission.
real name on it.
Exactly.
And you don't need to sign it. It's like it's zero trust.
You don't even need to sign the receipts anymore, thanks to MasterCard. Nope. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, but the concern, I guess, is it's not just the Chinese hoovering up the data either, right? Like I was doing some research yesterday on these initial access brokers that sell, machines they've compromised inside of businesses to other criminals to further their crimes and stuff. And this one initial access broker forum I was on was actually also selling complete dossiers on people in the United States. So I could search for people by zip code and purchase their social security number, their place of employment, their home address. And I could choose which fields, just check boxes in the search thing going, I only want you to show me people that were born between 1970 and 1980 that live in New York State that have income over 100,000. And it's like, okay, here you go, $8 a piece, right? This information's already out there. So I think the idea of protecting it is too late. The question is, how do we pivot away from relying on this information that's compromised? We have to stop using this as a form of identity. This is not a secret.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. To your original point about privacy, I would say it's an illusion, but every generation has less and less expectation and less and less privacy than prior generations. So I'm purposefully not on Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, blah, 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 blah. And my kids are on all those things. So my kids are the problem. And it's just getting worse. So what we have to do is design systems which account for these types of changes. I forget Simon, but somebody earlier said, well, it all depends on the system. I should not make my janitor go through some MFA in order to do his or her job because it's just too cumbersome, too complex, too costly, and so on. I think what we have to get to is the systems which would require or facilitate all people doing MFA because it's easier. And the consumerization is what I'm thinking of, right? I mean, there's Face ID, Touch ID as examples, and they have their problems, but it is easier to do Face ID than it is to remember a password. So that becomes the path of least resistance. The auto update to the iPad, or whoever mentioned that earlier, is on by default. It's easier to be secure and apply the updates than it is to go through the workaround to stop the auto update from happening. And of course, there'll be some idiots that do that. But for the most part, we have to make the systems that we rely on more conducive to better security. And if the data, if the information about us, the social security numbers, the driver's license, the date of birth, the mother's maiden name, if that stuff is out there, we just have to assume, okay, that's a failed component. We can't rely on something or data you can hopefully recall. We've got to rely on other mechanisms which are more consumer proof.
Your comments on this have prompted me to recall the idea that the panopticon that Jeremy Bentham put forth, the idea that actually that was originally for prisons, and that the amount of information collected, it would be used basically as a means of control, of oppression. And certainly some of the facial recognition that's being used now, particularly in Western China against the Uyghurs, is an example of where this is being used as an authoritarian kind of control. And that's what scares a lot of people, I think, in terms of privacy and information collection. One suggestion that's been put forward by, I think David Brin was the first one to talk about it, the Transparent Society, is that if the information's two-way, so if you have transparency and you have the same information about the people who are collecting it on you, that's a defense. So maybe we need less protection as a solution to make more information available.
I personally, I love that. I sort of wonder if there's a greater societal swing which will occur. If everything that our generation thinks is embarrassing is already out there about you, right? All your stupid dancing on a bar, doing your whatever it is you did in your 20s is already out there. The videos there, people, it's a little bit different because everybody's embarrassing moments are out there. Things that I would never disclose about myself because I find them embarrassing. My kids are out there talking about. So I'm wondering if this level of transparency swings to a much more radically liberal society where people aren't as sensitive about the things that you or I might be embarrassed about.
Yeah. Although I've been continuing to do those things. I didn't just leave them in the 20s. So, well, I noticed as you were talking about embarrassing things, Simon turned off his camera for a moment. I think there's some fertile ground there to talk further about privacy, but in the interest of time, what I'd like to do here is as we're getting closer to the end of our time, we've touched on a lot of different things, and each of you have a different but complementary view of a lot of what's going on. I think our audience would be interested in hearing what each of you think is a high priority, one or two things that we should focus on, and what are the obstacles to accomplishing them. Now, I realize that's a big ask, but we have all these challenges. We have hacking, we have pipeline problems, we have privacy problems, government regulation issues, ransomware. We haven't even talked about the looming threat of quantum, potentially, of rogue AI systems. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that we could easily fit in if we had at least another hour. But I would be interested in, from each of you, your own personal top one or two things that you think are really critical for us to make progress. And what do you think the biggest obstacles to those are? And if one of you wants to volunteer to go first, great. Otherwise, I'll flip a three-sided coin.
So let me kick off. Password stuffing, phishing, and patching, the fundamentals. And if you have any cybersecurity awareness at all, make it your mission to pay it forward, to train and teach other people. If we evolve society to have a better understanding of cybersecurity, then everything else will go much smoother. So phishing, patching, stuffing.
Okay.
I'm going to revisit something we said a few questions ago, but try. Right? You have to try, figure out, identify what's important to you and try. And it doesn't matter if you're an individual, back to how we all feel differently about privacy, whether our TikTok moments should be public or not. That's fine, right? But make a conscious decision. Don't let the accident of information that you disclosed come back to hurt you because you didn't know. Think about it, decide how open you want to be, and then enjoy Facebook or whatever it is that you're using, but make a choice. And businesses in particular need to identify, what their risks are and what they truly need to protect, and then try to protect those assets. And more often than not, we're seeing almost any victim that's trying, even if they're compromised, is able to boot the criminals out of their network and ultimately protect their information more times than not. And almost all the organizations that are suffering complete failure have not tried, and we're not doing any of those basics. And so those basics are the ones, of course, that Simon mentioned. But like, if you're trying hard and you've made it clear that it's a priority for you as a person or you as your business and your organization, and you have people on board, you're going to have better outcomes. And unless you're against incredibly sophisticated adversaries, which the vast majority of us are not, you're simply trying is generally enough to keep you safe compared to everyone else. And the ransomware and all this other stuff is a low-hanging fruit game in large part. And I'm just seeing that we saw that approximately 37% of people we surveyed last year were hit by ransomware, but 47% of them didn't have their files encrypted. Right, so over almost half of them now were able to successfully defend themselves simply by monitoring their network, monitoring for compromise, detecting the compromise, and then doing something when they saw it rather than ignoring it as another alert that just popped up in their console kind of thing. So I think that's encouraging that more organizations are doing it, but 47% is not enough. We need to get that closer to 100. And if you're trying, I think you'll do well.
Great. I guess I'm up. The greatest opportunity, I probably agree with Chester. He put it as trying or something like that. I would say I'd use the words transparency and accountability, which ultimately are a way of forcing people to try. Just simply driving transparency and accountability will change behavior, adherence to best practices, minimum standards, standards of care, avoiding negligence, however you characterize it. Driving transparency and accountability are the greatest opportunity for near-term progress in cyber, in my opinion. Greatest challenge, I'd say, is probably this concept of abstraction. We're used to saying, "Oh, I'm doing this on my computer." I mean, on your computer, you do almost, if not absolutely nothing. You move a mouse, you click something, you press a key, you hope for the best. But in today's environment, we're so far abstracted as users or even those designing systems from what is actually happening under the hood that there is a near infinite attack surface which is forming. So it's almost impossible to identify what's hardware, what's firmware, what's an operating system, what are applications, what networks, what clouds you're on, where the data resides, whose data that is, through where it traverses, and this combination and then the inability to abstract between what is data and what is executable. I mean, all these things and executables and decisions are being made on the data. Just the complexity of what compute is starting to look like is so far removed from our ability to digest it that it's just an area where I think there's tremendous work that needs to get done.
I think, if I may, what I heard you all say here is we need to have a greater awareness and commitment of everyone to the problem, rather than thinking that it is a domain of specialists only, and that we need to be much better about being open about where the successes and failures are as we all address those problems. Is that, do any of you feel that what you said wasn't encompassed by that?
Right, spot on.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great thing as a takeaway, and it's not the only one from this panel. It has been just a delight to be able to talk to all three of you in this format, hear your insights. I've spoken with each of you individually in the past, and that's always educational. I'm looking forward to at least a part of the panel later this afternoon and the keynote, closing keynote. Unfortunately, during the panel later this afternoon, I'm teaching a class on security, and so I'm going to have to miss part of the panel. But we are all very grateful for you spending the time and lending your expertise, not only at this, but with what you do on a regular basis. And I thank all of you.